Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And I got a story for you that is straight about a local high school, college, and NFL legend based out of the metro east of St. Louis and East St. Louis. This gentleman was an All-American high school football player, an All-American college football player, and then spent some time in the NFL. He went to East St. Louis High School, the Flyers, whose high school football program is one of the best in the country and is legendary. And then he went on to the University of Illinois and then into the NFL. But what I want to talk about is that the feds are going to be busy and they're going to be attacking at least three categories: the entertainment industry, as you see with the Puffy saga, politicians, which we're seeing that all throughout the United States, mayors, governors, the sanctuary migrant situation, these budget deficits and crises that are taking place in many of our cities are going to be under investigation. We have the New York City mayor, Adams, that has been indicted. And the third piece is going to be the feds coming after people for these PPP illegal loans. These COVID relief funds, these PPP loans, and these people that have created shell companies to garner all of this free money, they are starting their auditing process to find out who had shell companies, and the government is going to go after them. Very similar to the mortgage fraud that was taking place in the mid-90s, which also led all the way up to the 2008 real estate crash, where people were allowing individuals to do what's called stated loans, where they could put down any discretionary income that they wanted without validation. You had appraisers that were being paid off to over appraise and validate pieces of property that weren't worth very much. And of course, I could see that it was going to lead to a volcanic eruption. This PPP loan issue, there are going to be a lot of individuals going to jail based on these falsified documents. And here we have one about a famous football player who was legendary from high school, college, and on to the pros, who's got his hand caught in the cookie jar with two other folks. And this is coming to you straight out of St. Louis and East St. Louis. Metro East football legend and his business partners indicted on federal wire fraud charges. A former NFL player from East St. Louis, his business partner, and their bookkeeper were indicted Wednesday by a federal grand jury on fraud charges linked to money released in a COVID-19 relief program for their business. Now listen to how this entire scheme went down between these three individuals, allegedly. Dana Howard, a state champion at East St. Louis High School and an All-American linebacker at the University of Illinois before being drafted by the Dallas Cowboys and playing for the St. Louis Rams, was named in the indictment along with his business partner, Richard Scott Myers, and their bookkeeper, Glenn Sundquist. Howard, 52, faces 9 counts on criminal charges related to wire fraud, bankruptcy fraud, failure to pay federal taxes, and conspiracy. Myers faces 8 counts and Sundquist faces 3 counts. Howard and Myers are co-owners of Zoe LLC, a construction company in East St. Louis. The two applied for and received nearly $1.43 million in loans through the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, which was implemented in 2020 to help small businesses meet certain expenses and keep people employed during the COVID-19 pandemic. The indictment alleges the two used cashier's checks and wire transfers to funnel the loan funds through banks in St. Louis, Edwardsville, and Champaign for personal use. In one instance, according to the charges, Myers used $250,000 of the PPP money to buy a house. Howard and Myers then each filed personal Chapter 11 bankruptcy while failing to disclose assets obtained through the fraudulent loan, including hundreds of thousands in cashier's checks and the house in Madison County, the indictment alleges. Sundquist, their bookkeeper, is accused of falsifying and doctoring spreadsheets, invoices, rental agreements, and other records to show that Zoe LLC used the PPP funds on qualified expenses so that Howard and Myers would then be eligible to have the loan forgiven. The alleged scheme began in April 2020 and continued from October 2020. According to the indictment, Howard and Myers declined comment on Friday. Sundquist could not be reached. Howard, who resides in Edwardsville, Dana Howard, was charged with 2 counts of wire fraud as well as charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, false statement, bankruptcy fraud, false bankruptcy declaration, bankruptcy fraud, false statement under oath in a bankruptcy case, and 3 counts of willful failure to pay over taxes in 2020. Myers faces 2 counts of wire fraud as well as charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, false statement, monetary transaction in funds derived from specific unlawful activity, 2 counts of bankruptcy fraud, false bankruptcy declaration, and bankruptcy fraud, false statement under oath in a bankruptcy case. Sundquist, the bookkeeper, faces 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 2 counts of wire fraud. According to federal sentences guidelines, each count of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud carries a maximum prison sentence of 20 years in addition to financial penalties. Bankruptcy fraud is punishable for up to 5 years per count plus fines, the guideline says. Now here's the wire fraud. The 21-page indictment alleges that Howard and Myers applied for and received a nearly $1.43 million loan through the Federal Payroll Protection Program in April of 2020. Funds could be used only for qualified expenses such as payroll, certain debts, group health care payments, and other business-related things. Then, after 24 weeks, the loans would be forgiven if the recipients could show that the proceeds were used as intended and at least 60% of the funds were used for payroll. But Howard and Myers, the indictment alleges, diverted the money for personal use or to cover the debts of other businesses they were involved with. In April 2020, the indictment alleges each wrote checks to themselves for $500,000 from the Zoe LLC account, noting in the memo that the money was for payroll funds. They then used the checks to obtain cashier's checks for themselves from other banks. Myers, it is alleged, used 3 cashier's checks totaling $250,000 to place the money in his daughter's checking account at Busey Bank in Champaign. He then wired the money to a Madison County title company to purchase a house in Warden in the name of his then girlfriend, who he has since married, the indictment says. So he put the house in his girlfriend, who is now his wife's name. So he put the money in his daughter's bank account. Then he transferred it to a title company and then put the purchase of the house in his then girlfriend, now wife's name. Cashier's checks totaling $50,000 also were deposited into a checking account at Busey Bank in Champaign that was held by Zaid Trucking, a freight company also owned by Howard and Myers. The two made a series of withdrawals in the amount of $9,930. some of which were then redeposited into Howard's personal bank account, the indictment alleges. The partners also are accused of moving an additional $426,400 worth of loan funds from the Zoe LLC account to the Zaid trucking account and used it to pay down the company's debt. The indictment outlined several other withdrawals and deposits involving the cashier's checks obtained with the use of PPP loan funds. Now, here's where they falsified documents in their bankruptcy court. They're going in front of the bankruptcy court and falsifying documents in front of a judge. In June 2020, Myers filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the U.S. Court for the Southern District of Illinois in East St. Louis. On his petition, he falsely claimed he had $1,000 in cash and no real property, despite still holding on to a $200,000 cashier's check and the house in Warden. So he said he only had $1,000, but he had a $200,000 cashier's check, and he had this house that he purchased through the title company. Myers later used a cashier's check to make a $100,000 deposit into the bank account of AAA Rentals, a company owned by his wife, the indictment says. Now, he's in the middle of bankruptcy court, where you're in front of a judge, the IRS is going to be involved with it, the feds, and you are transferring money while you're saying you don't have any money. And so he had $200,000 in cashier's check, he had this house in Warden, and then he transfers $100,000 to his new wife, who also is on the title of the house in Warden. And he doesn't think that the government is going to follow this trail. This is Myers. Howard, a 2018 inductee into the College Football Hall of Fame, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in December 2020, despite still holding a $350,000 cashier's check. The next month, on January 27, 2021, Howard and Myers applied for forgiveness of the PPP loan, claiming the majority of the funds were used to pay their employees while the rest went to rent or lease payments, according to the indictment. They also checked no on the loan forgiveness application when it asked if they were involved in a bankruptcy. They put on their no. Both of them filed Chapter 11. They got multiple companies. They're in front of the court, and they're signing a document saying that they didn't file bankruptcy. So it says that they also checked no on the loan forgiveness application when it asked if they were involved in bankruptcy, even though both had filed Chapter 11 in the months prior. These guys must be bozo brains. Sundquist, who was the bookkeeper, was indicted on allegations of falsifying and doctoring spreadsheets, invoices, rental agreements, and other records to show PPP eligible expenses that Zoe LLC never actually incurred. In one example, the indictment says Sundquist claims Zoe LLC made payments to Treelore Enterprises for the rental of heavy equipment at a time when the company was not operating. The Treelore Enterprise company was not operating because its owner was serving a federal prison sentence. Can you believe that? Sundquist, the bookkeeper, claimed Zoe LLC made payments to Treelore Enterprises for the rental of heavy equipment at a time when the company was not even operating and the owner of that company was in federal prison. These guys want to go to jail. After St. Louis Bank, which administered the PPP loan, raised concerns about Zoe LLC's loan forgiveness application, Howard submitted a revised application with more claims of bogus expenses. The application was ultimately denied. In the meantime, Howard and Myers had applied for a second PPP loan for $1.3 million, again asserting that they had not filed bankruptcy according to the indictment. A pending motion by the federal prosecutor indicates the three men will be issued summons to appear in court but that date has not been set yet. As a result, in an unrelated case, Dana Howard, the ex-football player, also faces a charge of aggravated battery of a police officer in Champaign County. The alleged incident occurred on the field at Memorial Stadium after the Illinois football team defeated Michigan on October 16th. Man, what in the world is going on with ex-NFLer Dana Howard? I knew of him and saw him and had been around him back in the mid-'80s, a great football player. I don't know if this would be called just arrogance, greediness, maybe slight mental illness, or narcissism, where they are falsifying documents while in bankruptcy court, where I never had a bankruptcy, but I do know the details of it. I know people that have gone through bankruptcy. The one thing about trying to stay away from bankruptcy, if you can, is that once you allow the government or that state to get involved in your finances, it is like dealing with the IRS every day. They're going to check off every box to make sure that you are using your funds in an appropriate manner to pay down your expenses to get out of bankruptcy. Bankruptcy court does not want you to stay in bankruptcy forever. And so for them to continue, once you file bankruptcy, you're allowing the court to go right into the vestibule or the nucleus of your business. And you cannot lie. They're going to make sure that the bookkeeping, the record keeping is accurate. And for these guys to have this kind of hubris to think that they could garner almost $1.5 million in PPP loan forgiveness. They ascertained the first $1.43 million, and then they wanted to go back and get another $1.43 million while they're buying homes, using cashier's checks in the six figures, $200,000, $100,000 here, transferring money from banks in St. Louis, in Illinois, through title companies, and which when they're doing that and crossing state line, that makes it a federal offense. Also, it's a federal offense because they're getting federal money. There is no way out of this if these allegations are correct. And I'm telling you, the feds have awoken, and they are going to come after everybody who falsified documents and made up shell companies to receive this so-called free money. All money is not good money, and if it's easy access to get it, once you're caught, there's going to be easy access for you to go to jail. This is unfortunate for this premier legendary football player who decided to go in business after he retired from football, but evidently this game that he was playing in life was a little bit different than in football. And when the clock ran out, it looks like Dana Howard and his two business associates have lost this unfortunate game of lying about these shell companies and receiving this pandemic relief money and not doing the appropriate things with it. Unfortunately, he is going to, and then they falsified documents during their bankruptcy. Even said on documents that they weren't in bankruptcy, and they were. So there is going to be a lot that they're going to have to answer for. And with his fame and somewhat fortune in the past, I think that the federal government is going to make an example of Dana Howard if these allegations are true, and he may spend some time in prison. What an unfortunate circumstance. This has been a Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth.